Hey guys, Saf coming at you with another Raid Shadow Legends video, and in today's video we're going to be looking at the information released in the Raid Digest on Friday, which was yesterday. It relates to the updates to the Cursed City of Sintranos. We are in rotation 5 as of right now, which means we have completed the loop. We have completed all of the different rotations, and I didn't know whether they would just restart the loop or whether we would be looking at a different set of rules. They would change it, they would update it. Now, when they released the Cursed City of Sintranos, they said they had lots of plans for this Cursed City, and so far we have seen a grand old zero of nothing. So that is a bit of a concern, and this is the first change that we have had from them relating to this system. So what I want to do in the video is actually show you the update and also explain why I think this update is the worst thing they could have possibly done to the Cursed City of Sintranos, and I have data to back this up. So just before we get into the Cursed City of Sintranos, let's talk about this Boss's Rebalance. I've had a lot of questions about this. They mentioned it in the recent release of the Adeline champion. A lot of people were underwhelmed by the Adeline. I didn't even bother doing much of an event around it like I did with all the other previous login champions, purely because I had absolutely no idea really, other than showcasing some Sand Devil options, what I could really do with Adeline. And to be honest, I don't even think she's that good for Sand Devil for most players. So yeah, I didn't really put much effort, but a lot of the noise around it was, hey, you will need Adeline for a future boss rework that we're working on. Now, whenever I see that statement, I'm always a little bit like, well, I'll wait until I get the details. You know, the devil is always in the details. And a lot of people have been asking me what they're going to do. So I never thought they would ever break any existing teams. And they've kind of confirmed that in this update that, you know, this change is meant to be opening the lower floors up for the other players in the game, right? So hopefully it isn't just changing mechanics. Hopefully it's things like making sure that Iron Twins drops essence as an addition, not as a separate reward, and maybe increasing the drop rates of that essence. It's things like adding the Sand Devil and Shogun dust and powder to all stages, but in different quantities and different drop chances, right? So if I can only do stage 20, I should still be able to get some chance of getting the dust. It's just not the best chance. That's what I would like them to do to those things, as well as maybe look at the mechanics. I will say though that most of these boss mechanics are kind of solved, so if you simplify them any further, you may not be actually resolving the issue. A lot of these problems that the boss mechanics have, it's not about the bosses, it's about the lack of champion diversity. So for example, we don't have many sleep options. So the only reason why Adeline looks good is because it's a sleep champion. If we simply went back through the roster, found a bunch of really useless and epics and legendaries, champions which are super out of date, don't really have a place in the game, and just gave them things like sleep, the ability to place more than one debuff, gave them the ability to cleanse, gave them the ability to do something else. If we just expanded the pool so that it isn't dependent on Godseeker and Eri, Riho, and Siphi, then you will find that actually the boss mechanics are great. They're fine. The problem is, like the Torment Head and Hydra, we still are dependent on Firol, Duchess, or Shamael, or at very rare scenarios to Hanorach and Doom Priest. But you see what I mean? Out of 860 odd champions, you have to have one of these 5 champions, or the experience is going to be bad. And that is the issue with a lot of this rebalancing. The boss is not the problem, it's the lack of champion balance. Give us more available options for the things that we need to counter these bosses, and you won't have a problem. So we'll have to see what they do. Again, it's very vague what they've said in this boss rebalance. They've simply said, we're not going to break pre-existing teams, we're just going to make it easier. So it sounds like to me all they're going to do is nerf the bosses down so it's easier to do. But now let's get on to the Cursed City, the main topic of this video. What are they changing? So what they're basically saying is at the end of this rotation, we would have completed the loop. We would have done all 5 rotations. So going forward, they're going to change the way that the restriction selection is done for each stage. So I actually misread this. I had to get some clarification, and it was kind of a bit of a debate within my own Discord. So they're basically saying, Cursed City has 5 rotations. We knew this for a while. I didn't release them, but I knew that it was 5 rotations. Each stage has 5 filter sets. Each rotation will use one of the 5 at random. The Cursed City will circulate them one after the other. Once all 5 filters are used, the game will randomize all available filters and start the next rotation set. So what does this mean? Well, we're going to start rotating now. That's what it's basically saying. It started with 5, we're now going to rotate. Every time we get a new Sintranos rotation, each stage is going to randomly pick one of the 5 restrictions that is available for that stage. Then when it goes to the next stage, that will then randomize again. So we're not going to have 5 rotations with sort of 101 floors set to restrictions. We're going to have now unlimited amounts of rotations with weird combinations, and it should be the same for the server. I don't think it's going to be per player. I think it will be per server. Like the server will pick one so that, you know, everyone will be fighting the same restrictions for Soulcross 17. But Soulcross 17 might be rotation 2. You might have Soulcross 19 might be rotation 5. Cobble Market 2 might be rotation 3. It's going to be all over the place. Now, putting aside all the challenges that we have in terms of like our tools at HH Gaming, in terms of like the Stages tool and the Optimizer, why is this bad? Well, what you don't realize is thematically the stages do favor one faction or one particular champion a lot more than the others. So what you can do is almost build one champion and it will cover more of that particular rotation. And one of the biggest issues with Sintranos that they still haven't addressed, and they will still continue to ignore it, is the cost of playing that game mode. Constantly having to re-gear champions, constantly having to switch gear around. One re-gearing window is not enough for many players, and they've kind of moved it now to too late in the rotation. It needs to be like 1 week earlier. All we really want is like week 2, give us a free re-gear. Not right at the start, not right near the end, because it really felt like we were kind of in a rush towards the end to get it done because of the rotation and the restrictions that we have there. And because of that cost, the more champions you have to build, the worse it's going to get. Now, if you are a player, this is what I'm trying to do right now, where you build a hero, build a champion for Sintranos, and then leave it built, and then just continuously over time build more and more and more, then this change won't be too bad, in the sense that you'll have all of your champions built, so therefore it doesn't matter what restriction it picks, you should have a champion for it. But for many players, especially when you're getting into Soulcross difficult regions, you're moving your best gear around. So you're moving your gear from champion A to champion B to champion C. For example, I think the rotation 4 or rotation 3, all of the awakening rooms would allow me to use Alatrian. Therefore, I could build one champion, and that would cover all awakening rooms in Soulcross for that rank 5 champion that I had, which was a massive saving because I could essentially build one champion for 3 stages. Now, that won't happen. I might have to build Alatrian for one. I might have to build like a 5-star Creeler for another one. I might have to build a 5-star Duchess for another one. I might have to build a 5-star Dark Kale for another one. You see what I mean? I'm going to have to build more champions to cover more of this restrictions. Let me show you some numbers so you can see that this isn't just me kind of losing my mind making this up. I have been working on a method of assessing all rotations to try and find the champions you should invest in the most. The champions in which appear the most stages across all the different kind of territories in the Cursed City. And I did an initial pass and then realized I needed to go deeper. So I've still been working on it, but I've got more detail here. What you're seeing here is each rotation, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then I've separated the compatible champions based on their faction access. So at the moment, we're just looking at faction levels to each stage that exists within that Cursed City. Now, obviously, these numbers are bigger than 101 stages, right? We know there's 101 stages across each rotation. So technically, there's only 505 stages. But what this is doing is it's going, of all the champions in the Bannerlords, in rotation 5, there are 945 matches. So there are 945 situations where a champion matches a stage in that rotation. So what we can see here is, for example, Bannerlords feature in far more stages in rotation 5, nearly double than rotation 1. Versus Sacred Order here. Sacred Order appears in 1,101 versus 632 in rotation 3. So the point I'm trying to make is, when we're facing rotation 3, well, typically, we just need to be building more Bannerlords than we need to be building, say, more Lizardmen. When we're in rotation 5, we need to be building more Sacred Order and more Bannerlords and more Undead Hordes than we would, say, Ogren Tribes, than we would, say, Barbarians, than we would sort of Skinwalkers, High Elves. But then when you get to, say, rotation 2, well, Barbarians is much more popular. It's not linear, it's not even, it's not distributed across the board, which means that you will end up having this themed feeling to Sintranos where Orcs and Bannerlords show up a lot more often in specific rotations. Well, when you go to an angle where it's like, well, Soulcross 21 is going to be 1, Soulcross 22 is going to be 3, Soulcross 24 is going to be 2, this goes away. So effectively, you have to build almost like double the amount of champions, and they haven't answered the problem of silver. How are we managing this with the amount of silver constraints, the amount of gearing constraints, and all the issues that we have got? It is becoming a problem, and they haven't done anything to resolve it. They haven't sort of done an economy balance like I've suggested. We're not getting better sell rates from Ice Golem and Dragon so that it gives us the same amount of silver as if we're running Fire Knight. They haven't given us more efficient ways of gear swapping, like halving the costs. We're only getting one window and the odd National Laundry Day, which is really not enough. Really, we would need to see more than just a couple of days on like week 3 of Sintranos. It's just not really enough, I think, for many players. What I'm looking for is a rebalance to the way that this requires me to constantly move gear around. I mean, we have no gear loadouts. We have nothing available that makes this a friendly experience for a player. It is simply, they're asking you to build 300 champions. That is basically what they're now asking you to do. Before, they were basically saying, well, we're going to need you to build a few champions for each stages, and then you'll see where you go. Now they're basically asking you to build pretty much like a couple of hundred champions and keep them geared. Otherwise, you're going to be throwing silver away every single month. What I've just done now is I filtered this to the hardest content in Sintranos, which is hard mode Soulcross. Now, this is more of an end game thought process, a bit where I'm sitting positioned in my brain, but you can clearly see, for example, Bannerlords will cover over double the amount of coverage in rotation 5 for all of the Soulcross stages than rotation 1. Likewise, Sacred Order is like beyond double for rotation 1 to rotation 3. So this is the problem you have, kind of. It's almost like in rotation 1, I can get away with building like, say, 5 to 10 Sacred Orders, and that will cover me pretty much most of Soulcross. In rotation 5, I can do it with Bannerlords or Undead Hordes. But when I get to rotation 3, the champions that I've built for the Bannerlords and the champions I've built for the Sacred Order aren't going to cut it. So now I have to go and build more champions for Night Revenants and Orcs and Demon Spawn, or throw lots of silver. And in a vacuum where it's like 1 per month, it's not so bad, right? There's 5 months between having to go from Sacred Order to Bannerlords. The problem is, if they're going to make this more even, then essentially you're going to have to build the equal distribution of the number of champions needed for Sacred Order, Bannerlords, and everything, because it's not like they're it's not like they're opening the restrictions. They're just choosing which restrictions apply differently. They're basically taking one restriction from 5, one restriction from 1, one restriction from 3, and they're just giving it to you all in one go. So you're going to have to build all of the Sacred Orders that you need, all of the Bannerlords that you need, all the Undead Hordes you need, all the Shadow King that you need, in one rotation. Personally, what I would love them to do is to kind of fix the economy problem. If they're going to do this, to some extent you can argue it's a positive change, because it will solve this thematic problem of, well, the Sacred Orders I've built for rotation 1 are kind of not there for Sacred 3. It should even it out. The problem is, for most players, they haven't got the capacity to build and keep so many champions, so they're going to gear swap, and it's going to require them to gear swap twice as much. It is a further sink of silver, and there is nothing to compensate. And I will argue it's a change just so they don't have to make more restrictions. They clearly don't want to generate more restrictions. They don't want to create new rotations. So instead of actually like creating a new Doom Tower rotation, for example, all they're going to do is go, just roll the dice. Now it's a unlimited rotation. It technically isn't, because it's the same rotations and restrictions we've always used. They haven't changed the wave content. They haven't changed the bosses. There's no randomness to it. It's basically month 1, I might have rotation 5 at stage 19. Or next month, I might have rotation 3. It's not like I'm fighting anything new. They're just kind of trying to make it sound like it's new when it's not. Now, I'm sure by now you're all wondering, and you're all asking the question, which champions appeared the most in Sintranos? Now, I've only restricted this to hard at the moment because the volume of data was actually quite large. The thing with normal mode is there's far more open restrictions. So champions actually appear quite a lot, and it ballooned my my data source to like thousands and thousands of rows. Right now you can see I'm up to 44,000 different rows because of just the volume of champion, because I've done it per champion. But typically what we're seeing almost instantly is the volume of mythical champions are absolutely, like, mythical champions are the ones that will cover the most amount of roles. Calamitous, the latest Undead Hordes mythical, covers the most amount of stages across all of the Cursed City of Sintranos hard mode rotations across all stages. This is 114 of those matching pairings. The reason why mythicals show up more often is naturally because of their forms. If they exist in one form, they can kind of switch between two. That's why champions like Alaz are very good, because they do a lot of damage, even if they may not be classified as a damage dealer, and it's very handy. So you can pretty much see, of all of the most popular champions, it is all of the mythical champions. Every single mythical champion is the top coverage of Sintranos. So it does kind of show you that the mythical champions were designed for Sintranos, which is what I thought all along. It's just a shame that it's so difficult to get them. So if we kind of move away from mythical champions, because they are, substantially more popular, and we can start with the king of Sintranos, believe it or not, is Ultimate Garlic. He is the champion that appears in the most amount of hard mode Sintrano stages. We do have some useless things like Pig Sticker. Garlic is there as well. Chopper. Royal Guard is up at 67. This pairing here, Dark Kale and Gwyneth, I've seen this a lot just anecdotally as I've been playing Sintranos rotations. They kind of appear at the same time. They're epic Dark Elves, and they're a very good starter pack, because essentially with Gwyneth you get damage and healing. With Dark Kale, you get sort of decreased attack, debuff extension. They're very good, stable pairings. So these two are very good to invest in. They appear in 67 possible combinations. Jamas is also up here as well. Karam, Lorne the Cutter. I mean, a lot of these epics, you probably don't even know what they do, but they will show up for various different reasons. But they may not necessarily be, valuable. I mean, what we can do here is we can add a little bit of a filter, and we can basically exclude it only to see the actual legendary champion. So we can see that Growhack is actually the most popular, sort of most covered champion, the one that covers the most amount of rotation and stages. So he might be someone who is worth investing in, considering he does turn meter control. Same as Danag Skullreap, Suzerain Catone, Alsgore Crimsonhorn. These are actually, if you have any of these, they're probably good heroes to sort of invest in, because with Alsgore you get block damage, Suzerain decreased defense weaken, Danag AoE fear, Growhack turn meter control and AoE damage, Marshaled, Nethril, Alexander Sharpshooter, Warmother, Biggin, Foley, Ray. So what I'm going to do with this list is I will try and format it into a Google Sheet, attach it to this video. We will probably try to put something on the website as well, so there's like a coverage indicator for Sintranos. I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet, but it's something we will probably do, so you don't have to depend on this sort of time-sensitive spreadsheet. I'd like to automate it as much as I can. So when new champions come into the game, we can automatically update that so that you know kind of like, how good are they going to be for Cursed City of Sintranos? Well, they cover 63 of those matching stages, so they're pretty good high coverage versus, of course, the worst legendary is gonna be Jingwong. Of course it is. Good old Jingwong. Jingwong is the most useless in Sintranos, and he's probably the most useless Void Legendary outside of being able to counter Kaimar in the game. But we do get really destroyed by Jingwong on one Soulcross stage, which is just ironic. So you can see, like, Quintus, you get him from Live Arena, actually not good for Sintranos. Doesn't cover half the thing. You will find that a lot of Sylvan Watchers appear in this list, like Aileel, Emic, Oella, Jingwong, because Sylvan Watchers are just not used that often, probably because they feel like maybe not a lot of people have them, so they kind of focus on the bigger factions, like Elva, Seisha, all these sort of Earstrade, all of these Sylvan Watchers are kind of penalized. Lonatharil actually doesn't appear in many either, 39, which is actually quite surprising because I've used him a few times. But the summary I want to make, if Plarium want to make this change where it's going to randomly select one of the 5 restrictions per stage, they have to do something about the silver economy. You already have top players, creators, many of us have sat here for a while saying, the problem with Sintranos is you're forcing us to regear champions we really just don't want to do, and we don't have the silver to be able to constantly keep doing it, and one regearing event is not enough. And you've done nothing about that. You just ignored it, and now you're going to actually make it worse. Because where before I would only have to build one champion to cover multiple stages, now I might have to build 10 champions to cover those stages, because before, when Minaya used to be used in Amius and a couple of rotations stages in Soulcross, now she might only appear in Amius, where before I could build Alatrian and he will cover all 3 of the Awakening Soulcross stages, he might only cover 1 now, which means I have to build 3 separate different champions. And I don't know how much more clearly I can explain to Plarium that having this problem and not having a balanced economy is an issue. Here is my suggestions. Remove the campaign sell penalty for any artifact above rare quality. That means when I'm doing Ice Golem, that means when I'm doing Dragon, I'm not losing silver because I'm pulling speed set gears, I'm pulling retaliation gears, I'm pulling the hex gear set, right? The sets that exist in the campaign. There is a penalty that exists when you sell those items, which makes Fire Knight almost double the amount of silver income versus Dragon and Ice Golem. Remove that instantly. That will help balance the economy without punishing us too much, and just make it so that it only applies to rare and above, because you generally don't get rare artifacts in campaign. So it just means it helps give us a little bit more silver. I would suggest across the board at least a 25% reduction in the swapping costs of gear. At least permanent 25% reduction. At least, if not 50%. I have no problem with paying to switch gear. The problem is when it costs me more money to switch gear than it costs me to actually play the game. That is a big problem. And thirdly, it would be nice as well if we could target potentially the upgrading cost. If we can just maybe take 10% away from the upgrading cost, because I will honestly say I've probably lost more silver partially leveling the 10 to 20 gear than I will have made from selling the 80 to 90 pieces that I have sold and running Dragon. So that is a big issue. They could also, if they wanted to, affect the clan level and increase that by 5%. I'm not asking for whole scale system changes. I'm asking for you to adjust some numbers and change some settings that don't require much dev time to basically give us a little bit more balance in the economy, because right now silver is the #1 problem in Sintranos. It costs too much and it is too difficult to play, and you're going to make it harder. You're going to make it a bit more of a nightmare. So you need to do something to compensate that. There we go, guys. Let me know in the comments below. Are you kind of on the same wavelength as me? Do you think it's not much of an issue? What are your thoughts about this change? So just to clarify, each stage is going to roll one of the 5 possible rotations, and it's going to happen per stage, not per overall rotation. I will pin this spreadsheet into the description once I formatted it. And thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you in the next video.